Hello, my name is Fiona Brady and I'm the Education Specialist with Down Syndrome Ireland. I would like to welcome you to this presentation, which is part 3 of 3 presentations looking at educational programmes for children with a dual diagnosis of Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorder. This is one of a series of presentations on the topic, and it will give you an overview of the role of additional adults, specifically the SNA, developing an IEP, and transition planning. So let's head straight in and look at the role of additional adults, or the SNA. Generally speaking, the role of additional adults in the classroom can be extremely difficult, especially when the team is planning for student support. It's crucial to remember that every member of the team has an important role, but rules and roles must be clarified. And underpinning all of this, the needs of the student must be kept to the forefront. So, as I said already, in this presentation we're looking in particular at the role of the SNA as an additional adult in the classroom with the child. It's vitally important that teachers and SNAs have a very, very clear understanding of their respective roles. The teacher needs to understand the role of the SNA needs to understand their own role and also the role of the teacher. But most importantly of all, it's the teacher, not the SNA, who must take ownership for every child in that class. Sometimes the SNA, with the very best will in the world, can be quite unintentionally causing difficulties for the child with disabilities. Some examples of this could be, for instance, let's have a look at the possibility of an SNA sitting between two students with disabilities. She's helping them with their lessons, moving to help the other when the need arises. But when two typically developing students come over, they ask her which game would the child with Down syndrome and autism like to play with. This action should be an immediate red flag. Those two students could have asked the child themselves, but they had come to believe that the SNA was just there for that student and had become that student's voice. So therefore, they did not need to communicate with the student at all. This is certainly not what any team should want to happen. And it demonstrates very clearly the importance of looking for signs in a classroom of what the SNA role is becoming. Another red flag can be identified if the student with a disability doesn't really need to do anything because the SNA is sitting with them all of the time. They don't ever need to raise their hands to ask for help, to look for the teacher, or even consider what to do for themselves. Because if they ever looked puzzled or weren't working, the SNA, again with the very best of intentions, jumps in immediately, directs and prompts. It's very important to note that this is the way learning dependency starts. So let's just look at a possible alternative. If the SNA moved around the classroom, helping others, coaching peers and other typically developing students to give directions or information or assist the child with Down syndrome and autism, the scene becomes very different. And we will certainly be able to see that student's independence and confidence growing. This is why we must remember that the role of the SNA and promoting students' independence are very closely related. We need SNAs to see themselves as facilitators for the students, not as voices for the students. We need them to look after their care needs. We also need them to help the student to learn to listen and to focus on the teacher, not just to do the things for the child. We need to assist the child to access the curriculum on the direction of the teacher. And we also need to encourage the child to check in with their peers. All of these are vitally important duties for the SNA and should always be a part of their role and clarified for them. Another issue that comes up very, very often is communications with an SNA and parents. The SNA should always refer a parent to a teacher and should not discuss the child themselves. They should always follow the teacher's lesson plans, record any progress data for the child if required, but continually step back to try and promote student independence. Moving on to look at developing IEPs. Prior to the IEP meeting, it's very important that this meeting is a formal meeting. So therefore, it's important to set an agenda and to set a timeline. Decide who will be at the meeting, what are the assessment results, where are they, what are the updates and goals on progress, are they available? We need to ensure that all of the team who will be attending the meeting have time to read up on all the information we have prior to the meeting. It's also important that the agenda for the meeting gives an opportunity for every team member to discuss the child's strengths, along with any work samples they have, and along with any examples or strategies and instructions that are helping the child to learn. So looking at what could be included, not must, but could be included in an IEP. Data about the student's present level of performance, data about how progress is monitored, and data and information about whether the goals change from year to year. And one important issue, if we find we are writing the same goals every term, every year in an IEP, well then the big question is, why are we doing that? Moving to what should the IEP include? It should always include parental input. Parents should always be involved in developing the IEP, along with any ideas, progress and information from all teachers involved with the child. Goals and objectives we set in an IEP should always make sense for the particular student. They must be achievable for the particular student, and they must reflect the goals for that child. Goals should be tied to the core curriculum of the class and show us how we will know when that goal has been reached. And as we said in one of the earlier presentations, an IEP should always include goals on teaching cooperative skills, communication, and friendship skills with other children in their class. Part of the discussion about transition from primary to post-primary school is thinking very seriously about what will happen in post-primary school. One of the key questions to ask is, what will all the other post-primary students be doing? An area of concern too is the question, will the student with Down syndrome and autism be out of classes and away from their friends all of the time? If this is what we think will happen, well then it shouldn't be this way. So in planning for children with Down syndrome and autism to transition to post-primary school, we need to follow just a couple of recommendations. First of all, do with a child with Down syndrome and autism just as we do with every other student. Let them experience post-primary school and learn all they can from it. And it's important to always remember that any transition plan we have is A, it's a work in progress. It will change from week to week. And B, it is always a team approach. It's not just down to the class teacher or the resource teacher at primary school to work on a transition plan and to act on a transition plan with the child. Nor is that the role of the SNA. It is always a team approach. And remember, it's important that we rejoice and we enjoy who the child is and the uniqueness they bring to our classrooms at primary school and the uniqueness they will bring to the classrooms at post-primary school. Don't ever let labels or difficulties or uncertainties take the joy out of the child's presence in the school or in the classroom at any stage of their education journey. On the next two slides, you'll see I have listed some resources for you that will be useful for you to have a look at and consult. As I said at the beginning of this presentation, this is one of a series of 5 presentations relating to dual diagnosis of a child with Down syndrome and autism spectrum disorder, or ASD as it's often known. All 5 presentations that you see listed there are available on the DSI website for free download. On this slide, I have included our contact details, my own, Fidelma Brady, and also the contact details for my colleague, Nicola Hart, who's the Head of Member Support within Down Syndrome Ireland. I've also included the website for Down Syndrome Ireland, which is where you will access all of the presentations. Finally, I would just like to acknowledge the book that's quoted there on this slide, When Down Syndrome and Autism Intersect, and it's also listed on the resources slide. The work and the research from this book is what has informed this presentation. I hope you will join us for the remaining 4 presentations. Bye for now.